Hello and welcome to your notes on stress and health. These are following up our motivation and emotion notes, and they're incorporated in the unit. Okay, so the last notes, they're just individual notes, but looking at how the outside things can affect our emotion and our health. Okay, so just a little bit of an introduction to the field of psychology dedicated to studying stress and health. We call this field health psychology. So when you get to college, you can actually take it's soon over. You can actually take a complete class, psychology class on health psychology. And health psychology is really looking at behavioral medicine. So how you incorporate the psychology of thinking, cognition, your brain behavior, and what effects that has on your health. So I like the definition of health psychology, said it's a subfield contributes to behavior medicine. So you need to know what behavior medicine is. So in this case, we're looking at behavior medicine. It's applying it to health and disease. How do your behaviors and the medicines that you take apply to your health and disease? So for instance, some behaviors that you might have. If you are a smoker, that's considered a behavior. If you are a runner, that's the behavior of running. So how do those things that we choose to do throughout the day actually affect our health and the diseases that a person might get over the course of their lifetime? Now, there's been a lot of studies done on rats and animals with behaviors that they have. So purposely introducing carcinogens or smoke into a rat's environment and then looking at their diseases that they get, because we can't make people do things that are bad for their health. So a lot of these studies that we'll be talking about are done on other animals, and then some of them are research based with people. Okay, so let's start out with what is stress. Stress is high school. No, just kidding. But there's a lot of stresses that are going on during your high school years because of the life changes that are coming up. We'll talk about things that tend to cause stress over a person's life, and one of them is life changes. High school, because of the friends that you have, because of going to college, just like that transition from moving from your parents to being an individual out in the real world, it causes a lot of stress. But stress is defined, our definition of stress is a stimulus, so something that happens, and then the response. So a combination of those two. The process by which we receive information that may be stressful and our responses to that event. So the event that occurs is called a stressor, and the response is going to differ depending on the person. So we have a scale we call the stress appraisal scale. So when something happens, do you view it as threatening or do you view it as challenging? Okay, so that's our stress appraisal. And my example of this is that I have a math test. If you've been studying and you feel confident with the material and you've been doing your homework, then that is looked as like a challenge. So we'd have a low stress appraisal, right? So it might not be super stressful because it's going to be challenging to you. So we receive that, the stressor is the math test, as a challenge. Versus if you haven't been doing your homework or the content is super confusing right now, then it would be considered a threatening event. So you'd have different responses to the same stressor depending on whether or not you appraised it as a challenge or a threat. Okay, so the stimulus is the math test. My response is going to be based on how my feelings about it. Is it going to be a threatening thing to my body or my psychological well-being, or is it going to be a challenge? And that's going to change a lot of your body's response. So let's talk briefly about your body's response to stress. We're looking at this in terms of the adrenal gland. So think about stress as not like a math test, but something that might cause like immediate type of stress is something that's challenging in your environment that might cause your adrenaline to rush, right? So getting into a car accident, watching something happen where you have to react. So your adrenal gland releases hormones. We talked about our adrenal gland with our endocrine system. So your adrenal gland, the important one you releases all these hormones, but we've already talked about adrenaline, and now we're going to talk about the slow-acting ones. So adrenaline is like the immediate response. So when your adrenaline gets going, it's immediate. This is the fight or flight type of situation we've talked about. You have immediate reaction with the adrenaline that's released from your adrenal gland. But there's two other hormones that are released that are considered the slow-acting stress hormones. And that's cortisol and a big fancy word called glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoids. These are my slow-acting stress hormones. they have the delayed response in my body, and they act at a different speed than the adrenaline. So a stressor occurs in your life. It might be immediate. It might be something that might build up over time. Okay, and these ones right here, these two stress hormones, these are the ones that have the biggest health effects because they're the slow-acting things over time. All right, so let's look a little bit more about our stress response. So the psychologist that you'll need to know for stress, his name is Seelye. That's how I saw it pronounced online. So Seelye, and he came up with, or she, now I don't know. I haven't seen this person's first name. Darn you lights. Came up with something called the General Adaptation Syndrome. So GAS, awesome acronym. SEALS GAS, General Adaptation Syndrome. And really this is looking or outlining our body's 3 responses to stress. So the response system is in response to stress. The first phase your body goes into is something called the alarm reaction. What's going on? Something stressful is happening. I'm acknowledging that. The second thing is the resistance, all right? So you go through a period of phase called the resistance. And the third is finally when your body kind of gives into it, and it's the exhaustion stage. So Bodhi's 3-phase response, oh wait, hold on just a second. Okay, I had to look up the researcher's name. It was Hans Selye up here. It's a man. He did research for 40 years. Just checked in the book. And I have no idea what this Bodhi's is, so I'm going to keep it in there and circle it and come back to it later. But in your book, these 3-phase alarm, or 3-phase response is under Selye's research. Okay, so alarm reaction, something happens. That's kind of like the adrenaline going up. The resistance is your body kind of getting used to it, and the exhaustion is when it gives into it. So there was this phenomenon coined in 2000 called tender befriend. It tends to be typical of females in stressful situations. Try to make the situation better and then find comfort in other people. So if someone dies, they try to take care of everyone around them first and then befriend or come with loved ones to make it better. So let's look at this chart. You're going to need to know the end chart, but sketch it as we go along. So here is stress and illness, my general adaptation syndrome. So look at here. Stress resistance. Low resistance, high resistance to stress. Phases 1, 2, and 3. So again, low resistance, high resistance to stress. So the stressor occurs. First thing, the alarm reaction mobilizes my resource. Adrenaline gets going. My heart gets going. My blood gets pumping. So at first, it kind of takes this dip. My stress resistance goes down, but then it peaks. It goes back up. It continues to climb throughout my resistance. I'm trying to cope with that stressor. It's my stress resistance says high, like I'm trying to just deal with what's going on, take in resources, not really give in or not let it stress me out now. But then your body hits something called phase 3, the exhaustive state. This is when your reserves deplete, the body's resistance to stress can only last so long before exhaustion gives in. You might be able to deal with it for an amount of time, but eventually it gives in. So this is called the exhaustive stage. So the stress resistance goes down to low. I can't resist that stress any longer. So think about that in terms of these 3 major stressful events. So what psychologists have said, they actually have the scale of stress. And the 3 most stressful life events over your life are any major catastrophe, so floods, fires, your house being burned down, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, catastrophes, stressful life events, versus significant life changes, almost just as stressful, but significant life changes, going to college, getting married, having a child. Those are significant life changes, losing a loved one. And then daily hassles are a third type of stressor. So just daily things we have to deal with, work, getting enough money, things like that. So what that can actually do with the heart. So now let's look at that. So those behaviors of stress on our body. So coronary heart disease is the leading cause of death in America. I don't think it's the world. I'd have to look, but it's the leading cause of death. It might be worldwide. And what happens in coronary heart disease is the clogging of the vessels that get to your heart get clogged, right? So the vessels that go to your heart get clogged. They're not able to get enough oxygen, nutrients, anything like that. And this is the leading cause of death. And there's been a correlation between heart disease and stress levels. And remember the motivational speaker we heard, that video, was talking about heart disease. And there's two types of people. This is a little bit of social psych and personality types, but there's either type A personality or type B. Type A people tend to be impatient, anger-prone people, and type B are easygoing, relaxed. So who do you think might be more prone to coronary heart disease? What they've found is type A personality people, anger, impatience, tend to have a higher rates of coronary heart disease than type B, easygoing, relaxed. So your attitudes tend to have an effect on your stress and your heart, your health. And there's some more studies that have been done, so coronary heart disease. And then so these are called, or a coined phrase for something that where your mind is affecting your body, is a psychophysiological illness. So psycho meaning that you're thinking, psychology in the head, physiological, your body, illness. So these are mind-body illnesses, something where your brain, your stress, or something's occurring that affects your body. So things like hypertension, which is high blood pressure, or headaches can be psychophysiological. You're stressing out about something, it's giving you a headache. Okay, psychoneuroimmunology, or PNI, psycho having to do with the brain, neuro, brain, immunology, looking at infectious diseases, is where psychology, neural, and endocrine system kind of come together. So these are going to be things like, I'll talk about that in just a second, but this can affect so lymphocytes, so your white blood cells, your B and your T. These are your body's fighting of invaders, or your lymphocytes. And then what studies have shown with these psychoneuroimmunology studies, things like AIDS and cancer have have different rates of survival and prolonged life depending on the amount of stress the person feels because of it. So people who have AIDS, who are stressed, have stressful life events, or just stressed out about having AIDS, tend to have a quicker or a shorter lifespan, so a quicker period of time before being or contracting the disease and then dying. And then same thing with cancer. People who have cancer, who let them or have stress because of it, tend to have a shorter lifespan. And this is not just people. So again, talking about earlier, rats that were exposed to carcinogens and developed cancer, and then were put under stressful events. So either like being timed to do things or putting stress to find food, were more likely to decease or to die earlier than rats that were not put in stressful life. So you can think about some stressors like money or jobs, and people that have cancer or AIDS. If they have these daily life stressors or big things happen to them, they are more likely to be affected by those diseases. Okay, so stress and the susceptibility to disease. Interesting to think about. It's always been a correlation between your immune system and like being stressed. So if you tend to be getting less sleep, so think about what happens when you have less sleep or more stress. You have less sleep. You might not be eating as well. You might not be exercising, and all those things kind of open your body up to infectious diseases, or something that your body might have been able to fight off before. It can't, because it's actually dealing with all those other things that are going on in your body. Okay, those are your last notes in this unit. All right, so we talked about, I like this, the end makes me feel good. So we talked about our emotions, we talked about motivation, and then the last part is your stress and emotion, and health. So all three of those things are considered Chapter 8, and you'll have a unit test on those three concepts. Okay, have a good day.